There is a particular kind of quiet that only exists after people leave. Not the quiet of an empty room you have never known, but the quiet of a room that used to be full. You can feel the difference. It sits differently in the air. Maybe you have walked back through a childhood home after it was sold, or returned to a university campus years after graduating, or driven slowly past a restaurant where something important once happened, and it is closed now, the windows dark. And something in you responds to that. Something small and serious moves through your chest, and you are not entirely sure what to call it. That feeling has a name, or at least the beginning of one. What we are talking about today is the psychology of place loss, the specific emotional weight we carry when a location that held meaning for us changes, empties, disappears, or simply moves on without us. It sounds almost too quiet to be worth examining, but the more you sit with it, the more you realize how much of who we are is stored in places, and what it costs us, quietly and slowly, when those places go away. To understand why this happens, you have to understand something about how memory works in the human mind. Memory is not stored the way a file is stored on a computer. It is not clean or contained. Memory is deeply associative. It is tangled up with sensation, with smell and light, and the specific temperature of a room in winter. Psychologists and neuroscientists have long understood that context plays a significant role in how we encode and retrieve memory. The place where something happened becomes part of the memory itself. The kitchen where someone laughed with you, the hallway where you heard difficult news, the bench in the park where you used to sit and feel for a few minutes completely at peace. When a place exists in the world, even if you never return to it, it functions as a kind of anchor. You know it is there, and on some level that means the memory is there too, held safely in the physical world. When the place changes or disappears, something happens that feels almost like a second loss. The container for the memory is gone. What remains feels more fragile, more ghost-like. This is part of why people who do this kind of grieving often describe it as hard to explain. They say things like, "It is stupid, it is just a building, I do not know why it is getting to me." But it is not stupid. It is the mind trying to account for the loss of an anchor. There is also something deeper happening, something connected to identity. Psychologists who study the self have noted that our sense of who we are is not entirely internal. Part of how we understand ourselves is through the narrative of our lives, and place is part of that narrative. Where we grew up, where we fell in love, where we worked hard or failed or started over. These locations are chapters in the story we tell about ourselves. When a place is gone, it can feel briefly like a chapter has been removed from a book, not the memory of it, but the proof of it. And for many people, that quietly raises a question they may not consciously ask, but can faintly feel. If that place is gone, is that version of me still real? There is a concept in environmental psychology sometimes called place attachment, the bond that forms between a person and a meaningful location. This is not a rare or unusual phenomenon. It is a deeply human one. Researchers in this area have found that place attachment develops through time, through repetition, through the emotional weight of what happened somewhere. A house is not just a house. A neighborhood is not just a neighborhood. They become, over years, woven into the fabric of a person's inner life. So when people describe feeling a kind of grief at a demolished building or an abandoned town, they are not being overly sentimental. They are responding to a real psychological loss. And it can show up in subtle ways that people rarely connect back to this. Someone might find themselves avoiding a neighborhood after a relationship ended there. Someone else might feel a low, unnamed sadness every time they pass the road that used to lead to a grandparent's house. A person might spend years returning in dreams to a place they have not physically visited in decades. These are not signs of being stuck or fragile. They are signs of having cared about something, of having been somewhere fully. There is also a kind of collective version of this, which is worth naming. When an entire community loses a place, a factory that kept a town employed, a community center, a gathering space that held generations of shared experience, the loss ripples outward in ways that research on community psychology has described as affecting group identity, social cohesion, and even people's sense of the future. The place held not just personal memories but shared ones, and with it gone, something in the social fabric feels thinner. People sometimes cannot name what changed, they just feel it. So what do you do with this? The gentle shift offered here is not a fix, because this is not a problem to be solved. It is an experience to be recognized. But one thing that seems to help, and that therapists who work with grief and transition often encourage, is the practice of naming what a place held for you, not just what it was, but what it carried. The apartment was small, and the heat never worked, but it was where you first lived alone. The school looked unremarkable from outside, but it was where someone believed in you for the first time. The town felt limiting when you were in it, but it was where you learned what family could mean. When you name what a place held, you are not trying to hold on to it. You are doing something gentler than that. You are acknowledging that your experience there was real, that it mattered, that it shaped you in ways that persist whether the building stands or not. The memory does not require the container to survive. It is already in you. It just sometimes takes the loss of the place to remind you how much you were carrying there. None of this, of course, means that revisiting these feelings is always easy. And for some people, the losses wrapped up in place are connected to deeper grief or change that deserves real support. This kind of reflection is meant as a gentle starting point, not a substitute for talking with someone who can truly help. Places hold us in ways we often only notice when they can no longer do so. And there is something worth knowing in that, something almost tender about the fact that a human being can walk into an empty room and feel the presence of what was. That capacity for attachment, for meaning making, for caring so much about where life happened that even the walls of it feel significant, that is not a flaw. That is part of what makes a life feel like a life. Wherever you are tonight, whatever quiet or crowded place you are sitting in right now, you are already building memories that will one day feel like home, and that is worth noticing. If this episode stayed with you, there is a free reflection worksheet linked below that offers a few gentle questions about place and memory if you want to sit with this a little longer. And if this channel feels like the kind of place you would like to return to, subscribing means you will always find your way back here. Take good care of yourself.